My name is Matthew Duffy, and I'm going to be doing a presentation on improving episodic memory by segmenting events at event boundaries. This ties into cognition because our memories are the information we pull on to make our perceptions about the world around us. The first article that I'm going to be reviewing is effects of cues to event segmentation on subsequent memory. There was 4 conditions. The first and second condition were the same. They ran the experiment twice on the condition, and they used scaffolding events segmentation by using visual and audio cues at event boundaries, and a post-event summary that reviewed the event boundaries. So at certain parts during a video, they would have an audio cue, and they would slow down the movie to show where the event boundary was, and this would signal for the participants to mark that event boundary and create a segmentation. The third condition, it would have the same audio and visual markers that the first 2 conditions did, but they were cued towards the middle of the event, and the encoding would happen at that point. And then they were asked to review the event right after it happened in both those conditions. And then the last condition was a control condition, and they weren't given any cues. And then the memory was tested through a recognition test to assess the memory. The hypothesis was that younger participants will perform better with recognition and recall in all conditions, that older adults will show better memory of events in cued event boundary conditions than the other 2 conditions, and that older adults would have moderately improved memory of events from the middle cued condition to the event boundary condition. The methods that they used in this experiment was they used a sample size of 132. It was 71 older adults, and with 65% female and 35% male, and their ages ranged between 65 and 85. There was 61 younger adults. Their ages were between 18 and 25, and it was 53% females and 47% males. All conditions watched movies of everyday normal tasks, and then participants in condition 1 and 2 were asked to press a button to signify an important event beginning or ending, and participants in condition 3 were asked to push a button in the middle of the important events, while the control group was not asked to push any buttons or have any cues to what they were supposed to remember. The participants watched 3 short movies of a single actor performing an everyday task. The tasks involved like making breakfast, preparing for a party, or planting window boxes. The movies were all shot in the same way from the same camera angles, and this was to prevent from any confounding variables. The 3 movie conditions were a continuous shot, there'd be a bell rung at the event boundary with slowing down of the film and an arrow pointing at an object of importance, or the same 3 cues were used at a temporal middle of important events to cue memory. The results were that the younger adults recalled more than older adults in every condition, that the event boundary condition performed better than the unedited condition and marginally better than the middle condition, and the event middle condition performed marginally better than the non-edited condition in both younger and older adults. You can see on this graph that I've separated the younger adults from the older adults, so you can compare. This brown boundary is the event boundaries, and you can see that the event boundaries on both conditions did better than the middle, which is this blue one, and the unedited one, which is this gray one. And then if you compare across, you can see that older adults performed better than the other three conditions in the boundary condition, but not as good as the younger adults did. And that held true for all three of these categories. Experiment 2, in this study, they made changes to the control group to isolate the event segmentation as the mediating factor. The arrowing cueing of the event boundaries was removed in order to lessen the advantage of the cued conditions. And a review was added to the non-edited group to eliminate the possible confound that the review was actually mediating the better result scores. The results were, unlike experiment 1, younger adults did not remember significantly more than older adults, but the event boundary did have a higher recall in both younger and older adults. The conclusion is that intentionally segmenting an event at the event boundaries helps to retain the retention of episodic memories. So interventions can be developed to teach older adults to purposely segment events at event boundaries to increase their episodic memory and improve their quality of their lives. The second study was another event segmentation, and then on this one, they were trying to see if they could improve event memory for longer stints of time. And so the questions that they wanted to answer was, does deliberate attention to event segmentation facilitate memory? Do individual differences in segmentation ability predict individual differences in memory? And if these relationships between segmentation and memory are present, are they robust over retention intervals of days to weeks and translate to the sorts of intervals that are relevant for real-world event memory? And the methods were, they took a sample size of 482 people, 288 were female and 194 were males. The age range was between 18 and 66 with an average range of 30 years old. 3 movies of everyday events were played and 2 memory tasks were given after the films, a recognition task and a recall task. 3 conditions were there: event segmentation, intentional encoding, or timing. Event segmentation is where the participants were asked to press a space bar whenever a meaningful event began or ended and asked to identify the smallest units that were meaningful to them while trying to remember as much as possible. The intentional encoding group, the participants were asked to simply watch the movie and try to remember as much as possible. And the timing group, the participants were asked to press the keyboard spacebar at every 15 seconds during the movie, again, while trying to remember as much as possible. No prompt was given for when the 15 seconds were up. They were asked to count internally and estimate every 15 seconds. The results of that experiment was that the segmentation group had the highest recall with an average of 1 point, and the intentional coding group had the second highest recall, and the timing group had the lowest recall. The delay regression over time for the segmentation was at 10 minutes. The recall was the same as directly after watching the movies. At 1 day, it had gone down by 0.9%, and at a week, it had gone down by 0.18%. And then there was no significance found at any delay time for any of the groups. So the intentional coding group and the timing group and the segmentation group all showed similar delay regression. In experiment 2, they tested to see whether the effect of segmentation on memory was retained at a delay of 1 month. They controlled for a possible confound that they thought they may have had in the first experiment, that the presentation order of the movies may have been influencing the memory. And the longer delay time increased the attrition. So in the second experiment, another sample was collected, and they delineated from the 2 experiments by calling the second group, experiment 2B, and the first group that had the low retention, experiment 2A. Only two conditions were in this experiment: the segmentation coding and the intentional coding. The results confirmed the findings from the first experiment and extended them out to a month. The segmentation group recalled more information overall, but this difference was not significant for either of the experiment 2A group or the experiment 2B group. Viewers who segmented the movies during encoding remembered those movies better than those who simply watched the encoding of the movies for subsequent memory. In conclusion, segmenting an event into an event boundary encodes the event better than simply trying to remember the event without the use of event boundaries. The recall of episodic events is affected by segmentation for up to a month, suggesting that a more effective way to encode, that it is a more effective way to encode important events.